Good morning. Good morning. It is a great morning for us. I guess you all have been following activities leading up to this session, and you understand that this is a historical moment. We are excited about, for so many reasons, about being in the majority, as you can imagine. You see so much blue up here. Oh, I'm sorry, not somebody's over. But we're also excited, as you all know, we have a historical number of leaders as chairs of committees in the House and the Senate. I don't think there's been more than one at a time as it relates to chairs, maybe two, in the House of Delegates. And as you all know, there's 14 committees, and 7 of those will be chaired by friends behind me. And so we are so excited that we have a number of them that will be here to address some of our agenda items this morning. We won't be able to lay them out, and certainly with 23 members, we won't be afforded to allow everybody to speak. Good problems to have. But we do want to make sure that we outline our agenda. I guess I was going to make a joke about the gentleman from Norfolk, but then Carol Ford came behind. But we are so excited that Joe Lindsay has joined us because he's first up to speak. So I'll introduce the Chair of Privileges and Election, come noon, Joe Lindsay.
Good morning. Good morning. We have strived to make some progressive moves in terms of changing the face of social justice, this organization, and likewise the Democratic Caucus. On voting, the ability of all citizens in a society to be able to easily access their right to the polls. And you'll see a number of legislative initiatives in that regard. There needs to be an appreciation for enshrining principles of law that deal with access to voting, and in that regard, making sure that there are no discrimination as it relates to those who try to get access to the polls. You'll find that we're going to do initiatives to make certain that we don't have the voter suppression that has been a part of the past. Access to the polls, looking at getting rid of the restrictions that have otherwise been in the way, and also making sure that all persons are looked at in an equal fashion. And that's where you're going to find that we're going to have a very quick rollout of the ERA. Once again, a very quick rollout of the ERA. This caucus supports comprehensive legislation expanding the right to vote, making it easy for the citizens to exercise their right to vote, and removing unnecessary barriers that otherwise have been discriminatory practices of the past. We support allowing no excuse absentee voting, making Election Day a state holiday. Repealing Virginia's voter ID law, and introducing automatic voter registration while eliminating voter engagement and supporting reforms of funding. And this is something that is not just going to be the talk that we talk, but it's going to be the walk that we walk. We're putting finances behind these initiatives. This also includes the ability for Virginians to choose their legislators. We understand that a great number of people in the community have a problem with the ideal that we select you, our voters, as opposed to you selecting us, your representatives. And so in that regard, you're going to find that we are very much in favor of nonpartisan redistricting. I thought people would be excited about that. All too often, there have been districts that have been drawn that excluded. There have been districts that disempowered persons of color. There have been districts that silenced the majorities that otherwise should have had influence in terms of electing their elected officials. The caucus supports efforts to reform redistricting in Virginia that ensure Black Virginians and communities of color in Virginia are properly represented with a real substantive voice and a role in the redistricting process. On equal rights, another bedrock of a truly democratic society is that all people be treated equally under the law, a principle inherent in the 14th Amendment. Discrimination, whether implicit or in policy, application and effect, should have no place in the Commonwealth. This is why we strongly support efforts this session to remove discriminatory laws and better enshrine the rights of all Virginians under the law. This is also why the ERA amendment is more important to us than many would ever imagine, because it officially recognizes the importance of legal precept of gender equality in this country, and it is long overdue. We realize that now is that time to pass the ERA, and we stand with women to stand with all women in support of the equal rights under the law. I can tell you that I may have a little bit of knowledge on how fast a track we're going to be on. Somebody told me I was chairman of P&E. It is one of the bedrock pieces of legislation that we think has to get passed, and it needs to be passed with all due haste. So I expect that you're going to see that there are a number of social justice initiatives, much in keeping with that which I've represented and that which will be shared otherwise. Thank you all very much.
As you all know, we are also reflecting and celebrating 35 years since the first African-American woman was elected to the General Assembly. And so it is not only an honor to introduce the next individual, but an honor to serve alongside all these beautiful Black women. And yes, I need to hear some more yes. Some of your stars up here. But it is an honor to introduce the next individual, who is not only the chair of courts, but will be the first female majority leader and the first African-American majority leader. I give you the chair of the courts, Shauna Ahern.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And it's certainly an honor for me to be here today in this wonderful day to start it off with my brothers and sisters at the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. The age of mass incarceration must come to an end. For years, too many Virginia lives have been negatively touched by an overly punitive and often discriminatory criminal justice system that locks up our youth and traps people in an unending cycle of poverty. Across the country, there is a bipartisan consensus that the way forward in the criminal justice system must be one of reform, rehabilitation, and restoration. And the 2020 General Assembly session presents a unique opportunity to achieve this end. We do support a number of measures that remove and reduce unnecessary punitive aspects of our current system, measures that make it easier for ex-offenders to reform, rehabilitate, and reintegrate into society, measures that protect the rights of Virginians regardless of their economic means and socio-economic status throughout the criminal justice and legal system. The reform of our outdated marijuana laws, which have resulted in an unnecessary locking up of too many Virginians, especially Black Virginians and Virginians of color, which have resulted in burdening them with criminal records that stand in the way of their ability to thrive economically or otherwise in the Commonwealth. We've also support common sense gun safety measures. The reality is we live in a time where parents fear for their children's safety and lives every day as they enter school. We live in a time where Virginians fear for the safety of their lives and their loved ones when they're at work or in the office or out in the public space. As a result, countless Virginians, their families, and communities continue to experience trauma because of violence and hateful crimes. And yet, this fear-ridden and tragic status quo need not exist. We have it within our power to ensure a safe and secure Commonwealth of Virginia. The Virginia Legislative Black Caucus supports comprehensive gun prevention legislation that respects the Second Amendment rights while instituting common sense measures that protect Virginians, their families, and their communities. We are talking about legislation that includes universal background checks, limiting handgun purchases to 1 gun a month, requiring the reporting of lost and stolen firearms, and allowing jurisdictions to implement gun violence prevention actions of their own. In addition, Virginia can and must do better to protect survivors of domestic violence and to effectively prevent domestic violence from repeating. We support establishing an extreme risk protective order prohibiting individuals subject to a final protective order from possessing firearms, and we support the establishment of the Domestic Violence Prevention Fund. Thank you so much.
Okay. Next, we will have the chair of, well, come noon. Do I need to keep saying come noon?
No. We do.
All right. Time is coming. We got less than 3 hours. I guess it's our time. The next person you will hear from will be the chair of education, Ross Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to everyone. It is an exciting day here on Capitol Hill, one that's very historical and will always be remembered in the Virginia history books. It will be a pleasure to serve as the chair of Education Committee. Definitely one that certainly will help our community and communities of color and people of all ages. The Virginia Legislative Black Caucus stands in support of our Commonwealth students and their families, in support of Virginia educators and educational staff. We support fully funded our educational system K through 12 and increasing teachers' pay, support to our education and educational staff. Virginia must also continue to address inequities and discrimination in our school systems. We must increase diversity in our education workforce and increase bias training and accountability to education staff, including school resource officers. We must also increase funding and support Virginia historical Black colleges and universities, and I think that needs an applause. The school-to-prison pipeline still remains a large area of concern for many Virginians. We should be building a pipeline for our youth from school to economic and life success, a pipeline to prosperity and not a pipeline to prison. We must continue to work to address the school-to-prison pipeline through such measures as returning discretion to school administrators on when to refer students to law enforcement and eliminating school-based disorderly conduct charges. Too often carrying law ties school administrators' hands and mandate them to turn youth over to law enforcement over minor incidents or student behavior. It should be best left to the school and the parents to handle. In addition, we must remove discriminatory school policies, such as biased school dress code, which overly impacts girls and women of color. On the prevention side of the issue, we must increase our funding for at-risk programs, especially those in vulnerable communities suffering from poverty. We certainly have a lot of legislation that has been introduced, but it would be good for a change to get some good legislation through, and I know we will have that success in this coming 2020 session. Thank you.
I want you all to think back to what you were doing in 1991. I was in middle school. But the next lady was in her first session in the General Assembly. So you can imagine the big smile that you will see behind me once I move. I give you the Senator, Louise Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hopefully I will be here
Oh,
when
I'm so sorry.
Sorry for what?
I give you Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hopefully I will be still standing when your son is in junior high school. Good morning, everybody. As you all know, Virginia made a tremendous step in ensuring quality and affordable health care for more of its residents last year by expanding Medicaid. We must build on this success and continue to improve health care for all Virginians in our Commonwealth. In pursuit of this goal, the Caucus supports measures that further expand Medicaid coverage. Coverage for pregnant women, dental and eye care, coverage that removes unnecessary and burdensome Medicaid work requirements. We must also end surprise billing in Virginia. We must make prescription drugs more affordable and accessible to all Virginians. Maternal health remains a huge issue in our Commonwealth and across the country. In Virginia, Black women are more than twice as likely to die during their pregnancy than white women. This is unacceptable.
Yes.
We support measures to address this shameful status quo. Measures that will improve maternal health overall, as well as address the racial disparity that exists in it. Virginia must also continue to stand in support of reproductive rights and reproductive health access for all women throughout our Commonwealth. And I thank you.
I just want to make sure that you don't expect to hear from every chair. We just don't have the time. But we do have the time over the course of this session. You will hear from, and I just want to name the chairs that won't be speaking. Juwan Ward is not here, but she will be chairing Commerce and Labor, as you know. Luke Torn is not here, but he will be a chairing. My good friend to the left, Cliff Hayes, will be chairing Science and Tech, and his vice chair will be Hala Ayala. And next you will hear from the gentleman that will be vice chair of Militia, Jeff Bourne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. It is always a pleasure and an honor when we have this press conference to stand with these distinguished individuals who do more good for Virginia in 45 or 60 days than many people do in their lifetime. As you've heard, we are focusing on those issues that really do impact people's lives each and every day. And I want to talk about another one of those, and that's good, decent, secure, and affordable housing. This is a right that should not be infringed upon for anyone residing in the Commonwealth. Our country today continues to struggle with homelessness, and Virginia continues to face an eviction crisis that we cannot leave unattended for any longer. Last year, we took some necessary steps, and they were good first steps to address and to provide more resources so that families do not have to face eviction. But we have got to do more this session, and we will do more. I am confident with these folks behind me that we will continue to make strides and make it more acceptable and our resources more abundant to help families who are in this eviction crisis. Just like we make Virginia the best place to do business, it's got to be the best place to live. And so our initiatives to address affordable housing and eviction and non-discrimination will do just that. We will support measures to continue to increase investments in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We'll continue to try and invest in the eviction diversion and prevention program, and to increase funding for legal aid attorneys who help families navigate an eviction proceeding if it's gotten to that point. We're also going to support new legislation which protects and supports tenant rights, which help make the life of renters more fair and secure. Finally, the caucus is going to support, advocate, and push for the prohibition of housing discrimination on many fronts. Discrimination of any kind is abhorrent to our fundamental society, and so we're going to fight against discrimination against sexual orientation, gender identity, against domestic violence victims, and one that we've been fighting for a long time, and that's making sure that we continue to prohibit or ban discrimination based on someone's income or their poverty level, and how they might pay for a rental accommodation. And so I hope that you all will continue to watch and support our efforts so that we can make housing truly accessible, secure, safe, and affordable for all of Virginians. Thank you so much.
I do want to, before I turn it over to our vice chair, I want to recognize all of our members, and if you all don't mind just stating your name and the localities that you represent. I'm sorry, Rob.
Oh, I know.
Every time I state the localities that you represent, I remember that she has like 20 of them.
Jenkins, Suffolk, and Chesapeake.
Joe Lindsay, Norfolk and Virginia Beach.
Jennifer Carroll Foy, Stafford, and Prince William.
Alex Askew, Virginia Beach. Jay Jones, Norfolk.
Marcia Price, parts of Newport News and Hampton.
Delegate Rosalind Tyler, Brunswick, Sussex, Lunenburg, Franklin City, Emporia, Sussex, and that's all.
Jennifer McClellan, City of Richmond, and the counties of Henrico, Charles City, and Hanover.
Maybe Lodge, Hampton, Newport News, Portsmouth, and York County.
L. Louise Lucas, 18th Sanitary District, which includes all of part of Portsmouth, Chesapeake, Suffolk, Franklin, Southampton County, Isle of Wight County, Greenville County, Emporia, Brunswick County, Sussex, and Surrey.
Delegate Hala Ayala, Prince William, 51st District.
Sharice Aird, the City of Petersburg, parts of Chesterfield County, Dinwiddie County, and parts of Prince George County.
Cliff Hayes, 77th District, representing Chesapeake and a portion of Virginia Beach.
Joshua Cole, the 28th House District, the City of Fredericksburg and Stafford County.
Jeff Bourne, 71st District.
Welcome to the 71st. And so, Lamont Dagby, and because of redistricting in the courts, I only represent Henrico now. No applause for Henrico. Some of you have to live in Henrico. But the next individual and the last individual that you will hear from will be our vice chair for the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, the senator representing Richmond, Henrico, Charles City, 9th Senatorial District, Jennifer McClellan.
To the 9th District. We know that climate change is real and reaching a tipping point. We know that environmental degradation impacts our communities disproportionately. Black Virginians and Virginians of color, Virginians from poor and vulnerable communities, too often are disproportionately impacted by all aspects of pollution and climate change. Environmental justice is a key aspect of our legislative agenda. It is an agenda that supports the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, strengthening clean air and water protections, supports expanding renewable energy sources, and banning offshore drilling of oil and gas. We stand in support of a mandatory clean energy standard and for protecting Virginia consumers from excessive energy bills. Our caucus envisions a Virginia with an environmental justice council, a commonwealth where our youth and communities are properly educated on climate change and recycling and environmental justice issues. These are just a few of the issues that we will be supporting in this session because we recognize every issue is a Black issue. Every issue affects communities of color. Every issue affects vulnerable communities. We are their voice. You heard a little bit today that we are celebrating the 35th year of Black women serving in the General Assembly. What I realized last night, because as many of you know, I'm a history nerd, 150 years ago, the first African Americans in Virginia served in the House of Delegates and the Senate. Their names are on plaques that we put in the Capitol. We stand on their shoulders. We are their legacy. We will continue their fight. This year, as we have for centuries, we will work to eliminate the last vestiges of racism and white supremacy in Virginia law today. All of us are ready to work. We thank you for joining us. It is our time.
No,
We used to take questions.